Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here to announce my new Cabinet lineup. A few days ago, I outlined my priorities as Prime Minister. The government I lead will be a government that backs New Zealanders to succeed. We'll support those who take risks to create new jobs and new business, and we'll support those who have the courage to make changes to their lives to build a better future for themselves and their families. New Zealanders believe that hard work should be rewarded and that we should assist effectively those who need help to help themselves. Today I'm announcing the makeup of the Cabinet that will build on the progress of the past 8 years and deliver ongoing benefits for all New Zealanders. I'm not a believer in change for change's sake, but we do have a special opportunity with the resignation of John Key for the government to renew itself by bringing fresh energy and talent into the Cabinet. National's in the fortunate position of having plenty of both. The current Cabinet has steered New Zealand through recession and natural disaster. It's got the government's books back in order and given us a rare opportunity now to make a difference to many New Zealanders' lives over the next few years. We have choices, positive choices, that very few other developed countries have. The backbench is brimming with talent and energy. The Cabinet I'm announcing today blends the experience and talent of the cabinets that have done such a good job over the past 8 years, with public support tested through several elections, and blending that with the new talent and energy of National's backbench MPs. 4 new ministers will be sworn in by the Governor-General, Alfred Ngaro, Mark Mitchell, Jackie Dean and David Bennett. Alfred has been appointed directly to Cabinet as Minister for Pacific People and Minister for the Community and Voluntary Sector. Mark, Jackie and David are being appointed ministers outside Cabinet. The promotion of all 4 is a recognition of their experience, their talent and their hard work as electorate MPs and select committee chairs. 3 MPs are ending their ministerial contributions, Sam Lotuinga, Craig Foss and Joe Goodhue. All 3 have been competent ministers who've made significant contributions to the operations of government and to New Zealand in their respective portfolios. Sam and Craig have announced their intentions not to seek re-election in 2017. Joe, I believe, has a contribution to make to the ongoing administration of Parliament. A further 2 ministers, Hekia Parata and Murray McCully, will shift from Cabinet to the backbench on the 1st of May. Replacements will be announced closer to the time. Other significant changes include Deputy Prime Minister Paula Bennett adding police, women and tourism portfolios to state services and climate change, the confirmation of Stephen Joyce as the Minister of Finance and his appointment to a revived role of Minister for Infrastructure, the appointment of Simon Bridges as Minister for Economic Development and Associate Finance Minister, the consolidation of social housing and Housing New Zealand portfolios under one Minister, Amy Adams, and making Amy the Minister responsible for social investment, and the appointment of Anne Tolley as Minister for Children. Safety and security are very important to New Zealanders, so putting police with the Deputy Prime Minister underlines how importantly we take that responsibility. Stephen Joyce has a thorough understanding of the economy as both a successful businessman and an Associate Finance Minister and Minister of Economic Development, whom I have worked closely with over the last 8 years. His new infrastructure portfolio recognises the importance of building infrastructure for growth and good decisions about investment to make sure New Zealand can meet the needs of a growing economy. The addition of economic development and associate finance to Simon Bridges' other responsibilities recognises his role now as a key part of our economic team. Bringing social housing and Housing New Zealand together under Amy Adams will ensure we coordinate the way we meet the housing needs of the most vulnerable. As Minister responsible for social investment, this signals our continued determination to achieve better outcomes for our most vulnerable. And Anne's appointment as Minister for Children highlights our commitment to promoting the interests of our most valuable and at times our most vulnerable citizens, and that is our children. There are a number of other changes of which I'm happy to discuss if you have questions, but I do want to thank my colleagues for another week of constructive, civil and forward-looking discussion about the roles that they can have in what we believe will be a very successful national-led government. Any questions?
Why have you demoted Judith Collins and taken policing corrections off her?
Well, first, it's not a demotion in the sense that if we're bringing people through, they can't all be ranked in the same number in the cabinet. So some numbers move up and down. I have to say, it's something that's not of that much public interest. But with respect to the portfolios, Judith has a set of business and commercial experience and ability that we haven't been able to use, and we think with given her a strong advocacy around police and corrections, done a great job in those portfolios, and it's time, and now we can use her talents elsewhere in revenue and commerce.
Was she happy when you told her that she was going down the rankings and losing police and corrections?
Oh, I think every minister's happy to have the opportunity to serve in cabinet, and Judith was no exception.
Did you leave Murray McCully in Foreign Affairs to avoid a by-election? He'd said that he'd only stay on in Parliament as long as he held that portfolio.
No, I didn't. As an incoming Prime Minister, my experience with the increasingly complex issue of New Zealand's foreign affairs and overseas interests is limited, and I'm keen to have the benefit of Murray's experience. I mean, he is now, I think, the longest serving foreign minister in the developed world, done a fantastic job just this week completing New Zealand's time on the Security Council, and I think it's important that I work with him to get a transition of his knowledge to me and his experience at the same time as we sort out who's going to follow on from Murray. But the primary reason for that transition with Murray is that he's going to be able to assist me as an incoming Prime Minister who needs the benefit of that experience, and as part of that he'll probably he'll come on some trips with me and so on.
So that's just a fortuitous coincidence that the May the 1st date sort of coincides with 6 months roughly after an election?
Oh, well, it's not driven by by-election, it's just weighing up other transitional issues such as with the Minister of Education. So no, it's not driven by the by-election, it's just they get to the end of the budget round, that seems to be a sensible time.
Alfred Naro straight into cabinet is a huge jump. What's behind that?
Well, we've got first his experience and expertise across a whole range of social issues, and we're keen to advance those issues in the political debate. I just think Alfred has got a unique type of experience for a national MP, and a very persuasive ability to articulate what this government's trying to achieve.
Prime Minister, who is the Minister of Housing? Who's the Minister of Housing in your cabinet?
Well, Nick Smith's the Minister of Building and Construction, so that's really the regulatory task, which means that he's also continues to oversee the Special Housing Areas program and the RMA amendments, so it's basically regulatory. And the Minister for the government spending its money on housing is Amy Adams.
So, but there used to be a Minister, of Housing, and now it appears there isn't. Is that a...
Oh no, just a change in the title. There hasn't been someone designated as the Minister of Housing. But we're consolidating the portfolio a bit. We've been through a long phase of both policy development and getting the government's building program up and running. Those are both in good shape now, so we're able to consolidate the portfolio.
So we don't need a Minister of Housing in New Zealand at the moment?
Well, we've got a Minister of Social Housing, that's the job, and then for Amy Adams, and Nick Smith is essentially our Planning Minister. Those are two complex functions, and I wouldn't try to put them all together into one job. It would be bigger than half the rest of the cabinet put together.
I mean, I'm sorry to labour the point, but why is the title gone? What?
Well, the only change in title has been from building and housing to building and construction, which reflects more the regulatory role that Nick's in.
Is
There's
Nikki
argument that
Cade-
sounds
is Nikki
like
Cade-
you've got no minister in charge of it.
Well, it's a collective responsibility. There's different parts to it. One is the regulatory role, as I've outlined, which is a huge task. It includes the significant amendments to the RMA, the Urban Development Agency legislation that's coming, which is one of the biggest single pieces of legislation we've put through. So that's Nick Smith's responsibilities. And then there's the job of overseeing the government entity which owns 1 in every 16 houses in New Zealand, as well as all our housing subsidies, and that's Amy Adams' job. So look, I've worked closely on these issues for 5 or 6 years, probably more than anybody, more consistently, and it's my view that these are the most effective arrangements to take the government's program forward, because over the next 12 months to 2 years we're going to be delivering a lot of change in housing.
Is Nikki Cade likely to get education on May the 1st?
Likely. Her progress and prognosis is good, but we don't want to put pressure on a minister who's had some health issues. So part of the rationale for the 1st of May is to ensure that Nikki has plenty of time. So she's in the list there with a light workload, but if she returns to work healthy, then it'll certainly be she'll certainly be getting more work.
Is this a big enough change to satisfy the message that we got from the back, one new cabinet minister, but is it going to be enough?
Yes, it is. By the time we've completed the transition in May, there'll be 6 new ministers. That's almost a quarter of the cabinet. It will be the largest reshuffle for quite some time. There's around half of ministers have got a change in responsibilities. And when you get that scale of promotion of ministers, you get a wide range of opportunities in the parliamentary system, particularly around select committee chairs. So there'll be very few of the backbench who are unaffected and who don't have opportunities that weren't there before.
Simon Bridges
Sorry?
and Amy Adams.
Well, that's a matter for the caucus. We're just dealing with the cabinet today, and we'll deal with the whips as time goes by.
Simon Bridges, Amy Adams and Jonathan Coleman, are they going to be more involved in the senior leadership of the social protection cabinet?
Well, they'll certainly be more involved in the senior leadership, and that's quite a challenge, because it gets you involved in the broader decisions made by government outside your portfolio. And these are now quite experienced politicians, and it's great to see that we've got more people than are able to take part in that senior leadership role.
Who's in the frame for foreign affairs next year?
Well, you'll just have to wait and see.
The
Regarding
Women's
the
Minister
West
used to
Hudson,
sit
she got
outside
some-
Cabinet. Why have
Sorry?
you moved that to your number 2?
What's that?
The Women's Minister used to sit outside Cabinet. Why have you moved that role to your number 2?
Oh, look, it reflects the role that Paula Bennett now has. She's our second only female Deputy Prime Minister, and I think that's something to be celebrated. She's keen to take up the role. She's a fantastic inspiration to a lot of women, not just women in corporate life or the public service, but right across our community. So I'm very pleased to be able to work with Paula for her to be in that role.
Louise Upton had quite a tough time in that role, and with the land information stuff. You've moved her to corrections, which is quite a difficult portfolio. Has she got what it takes?
Yes, she has. Yeah, look, Louise is a hard-working and diligent minister. She's had to deal with some tricky issues, as many ministers have, but we've got confidence in her.
Shouldn't that be a role for a senior, more experienced minister though? Sam Wahawanga got fairly badly burnt by that portfolio.
Look, there's been a number of changes in the portfolio, and particularly the transparency of the inspection processes which we're bringing in, I think is going to mean that issues that are there are dealt with sooner, more effectively, So there's been lessons learnt from the last time round about making sure all the issues in our prisons are there to be seen and to be dealt with.
Isn't it more a role for an old hand rather than a relatively new hand?
Look, Louise has been a minister for a number of years, as has been pointed out, dealing with some pretty tricky issues, including the Overseas Investment Act, and so I've got confidence that she's got the capacity to deal with it.
Do you see anybody else moving into the ministry at the May transition?
Well, at the May transition, if you look at the numbers, we're currently running a cabinet of 21 for 4 or 5 months, which is one more than usual. So when 2 ministers step out, the cabinet will shrink back down to 20. We're also currently running only 4 ministers outside cabinet, and that'll expand to 5 at the 1st of May. So effectively you'll have 1 vacancy in cabinet and 2 vacancies outside cabinet.
You've changed Anne Holly's title as the Minister for Children from vulnerable children. Why did you do that?
Oh, look, I think it was just an opportunity to use the straightforward language people understand. It doesn't change the breadth of the role, because the role right now is to bed in the new agency, Oranga Tamariki, implementing the changes for the kids who are in care, which is a small group of our most disadvantaged children. And then as that occurs over the next 12 or 18 months, the role will expand to broader groups of children and families.
Will the ministry's name change as well?
No, we're not proposing to change the name of the ministry at this stage.
Paula Bennett's list of portfolios is quite long and some of them are quite labour intensive, but she's also supposed to be supervising this inclusion of the backbench of the government, or what she said the other day. Is she going to have time to do that?
Yes, she's a politician with enormous energy, and she's already reshaping or shaping up our policy process for election year, because that's when, in the latter part of this year, somewhat interrupted by the leadership change, but certainly heading into next year, we'll be drawing on the ideas right across the caucus, and Paula's organising that. She'll get through that phase fairly quickly. I mean, part of what we're going to be doing is ensuring that ministers work with the backbench on a regular basis, and that'll give Paula time to do her portfolios. I mean, she's not going to be doing ministers' jobs for them.
Does that mean that you'll also be taking legislation to caucus more frequently?
Well, it always goes to caucus, but they welcome discussions where the issues affect them directly in their community. Law and order and justice related issues, for instance, they're always keen to discuss. So I'd expect you will see some of the earlier thinking flagged with the caucus.
Prime Minister, who will be in your senior leadership team, the team that is sometimes referred to as the kitchen cabinet? Who will be in that team?
Well, I think the senior leadership isn't just a kitchen cabinet. I mean, there's an ongoing process of discussion among ministers about all sorts of issues. But I think the way I'd describe it is that Amy and Simon Bridges and Jonathan Coleman will be part of the senior leadership team.
Can you explain the David Bennett promotion?
Oh, look, David's been in Parliament for some time now. He's been an excellent select committee chair. He's played a pretty strong role in the development that's going on around Hamilton, both for transport and for education. He's a good example of a very well-connected MP in his community. He's built up a lot of experience, and I think he'll be a very good minister. Just because a number of these people aren't 35 doesn't mean they don't have energy and talent. They certainly do. In fact, it's a feature of our caucus, is the breadth of experience of so many of these people.
We've now got
Did you
21.
also free up committee chairs for your other backbenchers as well?
Well, it certainly does provide that opportunity for the last couple of intakes to move up the pipeline of responsibility.
You've now got 21 ministers in cabinet. Will that stay that way once a couple of them leave, or will you stay on that 21 number, or bring it back down to 20?
We've got 21 in this list today and 4 outside, and after the 1st of May it'll be 20 in cabinet. We'll revert to the normal number, which I think is appropriate, and there'll be 5 outside. So that'll provide for a couple of vacancies.
In terms of the campaign chair, that role usually held by Stephen Joyce, will he continue to do that while he is Minister of Finance? Is that the intention, or?
Yes, he will. Yep.
Would the select committee chairs, can you see any of the intake from 2014 moving into those positions?
Well, look, that's to some extent a matter for Parliament, and Jerry Brownlee is a very experienced leader of the House, is working on that. But it does provide that sort of opportunity.
What about, do you see the Speaker, Deputy and Assistant Speaker changing before in the next year?
Well, look, ultimately that's a matter for Parliament, but there's some change being signalled there, and we'll be part of the discussions about how all that works.
Do you mean by Chester Borrow's leaving? When you say changes being signalled?
Oh, well, both Chester and Lindsay have signalled they're retiring at the next election.
Prime Minister, what did Jo Goodhue do wrong?
Oh, she didn't. She's done a fine job. I've worked with her pretty closely on some of the more difficult changes that follow from social investment. She's been responsible for what's called the Community Investment Fund, and that's been taking what are hundreds and hundreds of contracts for social services that we believe need to be changed, and has overseen a process of over 2 or 3 years of bringing about that change, which I think has been without a whole lot of fuss and bother, which I think has been quite an achievement, along with her ongoing work with the community and voluntary sector. But look, it's just part of a process here where she wants to be in Parliament. She's done a fine job as a minister. We're considering other roles for her.
What do you think Amy Adams will be doing as Associate Finance Minister?
Oh, she'll be providing particularly the connection to the social investment process. You'll see she's listed, and it's not a portfolio, it's just a listing on the right-hand side of the page there as Minister responsible for social investment. So there's changes going on in the public service about how to deliver social investment more effectively. Amy's a thorough and energetic minister, and I think we're at a stage where more precision will help us to deliver in communities more effectively.
Why did you decide not to appoint a successor now on education and foreign affairs?
Oh, it's simply just partly because of the uncertainties. There's some uncertainties, and when you've got a minister who's recovering well with health issues, you don't quite know how all that's going to run, and we don't want to put pressure, particularly on Nikki. So that's we don't want to put pressure on Nikki, and then on the foreign affairs side, I need to get a feel for how it all works. I've done some international work as a finance minister, but there's a whole range of issues that the previous Prime Minister and the New Zealand sort of foreign policy establishment are involved with that I'm not familiar with, and when I've got a clearer picture of that, I think I'll have a better idea of what the succession should look like.
Prime Minister, just coming back to the removal of housing as a specific portfolio, who then are questions directed at, such as when the average house price in Auckland goes over $1 million? Who's responsible?
Well, it'll depend on the nature of the question, but there's, fundamentally that's a product of the regulatory environment. The questions about that are best directed actually to the Auckland City Council. They make all the rules and decisions about housing in Auckland. Insofar as there's an ongoing ministerial interest in it, that'll be Nick Smith.
So you're serious that you think now that you've removed this title that questions about house prices in Auckland should be directed to the council? Is that serious?
Well, that's always been the case, and I've argued that myself in the Parliament. The government does not set house prices in Auckland. The Auckland City Council sets the rules that help determine those house prices. But look, the Minister of Housing title was used. We don't think of it as removing the title. There's someone's got to be a Minister of Housing for statutory purposes, but the functions are pretty clear. That is, there's a social housing role, which is a big one. It's overseeing 1 in every 16 houses in New Zealand. Large, complex role these days because we're doing it properly. It's not a quiet backwater where nothing happened like it used to be. And then there's a very large-scale regulatory change program going on, which Nick Smith's at the heart of, and so it makes sense to see it to divide the world that way.
Another issue, why have you made Sir Jerry Matter-Frye High Commissioner to London when it's such a vital trade role in the coming few years?
Well, that's a decision that's been announced. Sir Jerry has, look, from his background, both as a Governor General and his extensive role in the Defence Forces, is, in my view, very well committed for that role, very well equipped for it, and he'll be backed up by, you know, the recognition in the UK that New Zealand has particular expertise in trade, and that'll be part of the job he has to carry out, backed up by a team that are globally recognised as pretty good.
Have you demoted Nick Smith? I see his cabinet position's gone from 11 to 15.
Well, look, with the cabinet rankings, apart from in a very general sense, there's the sort of top half dozen, and then there's ministers new to cabinet. Apart from that, it's really just a product of allocating the jobs to the people. So no, in that sense, he hasn't been demoted. It's just if you're bringing younger ones who were below him up as part of the senior leadership team, then naturally enough, people are going to drop back. So Michael Woodhouse, for instance, has moved, I think, from about 19 to 9. Now that's deliberate. He's a minister with a lot of capacity, and he's going to be an important part of the cabinet.
So what does this cabinet say about your policy direction? What changes out of this?
I think it's simply, we've had the opportunity to think through where we need the mix of skills on issues that are particularly those that are more complex for the government to deliver on. So one of those is housing, where we've consolidated the portfolios more. I think it also says you'd expect to see Paula Bennett and issues around women and law and order as a pretty strong focus for the government. And otherwise, it's, there's quite a lot of detailed work that goes in there to match people up. But you would expect it to generally be a cabinet that's out on the road selling the message, and with some pretty strong focus through next year on what we believe are going to be election-related issues and good for New Zealand.
Are we still on track for an election in the second half of next year?
Yes.
Why didn't you give ethnic communities to Alfred Naro?
Oh, it's a very big job. He's got the Pacific People's job, and Judith Collins has had it before and actually did a very good job of it. Worked well with different MPs and the different communities. She's Auckland-based, very experienced, and I think it actually needs that kind of senior oversight. The ethnic communities have a strong expectation of continuous engagement with senior members of the government, and Judith meets that criteria.
Who will be leading your response on pay equity? Will it be Paula Bennett or Michael Woodhouse?
Well, they've been leading it up to now. Paula partly through a state services, but certainly through a women's portfolio. And Mike Woodhouse has done a lot of the technical work. Jonathan Coleman's been heavily involved because the initial claims have focused on healthcare workers. So I wouldn't imagine significant change. That process is now well advanced. We made the announcements before Christmas, which were really quite a historical step. And so now we've just got to bring the legislation through and complete the negotiations that are currently before us.
Will Stephen Joyce, as Minister for Infrastructure, will he take some responsibility for housing?
He'll be involved in things like the Housing Infrastructure Fund. There's so many legs to infrastructure that there's always going to be a number of ministers involved. So Simon Bridges is specifically transport, Amy Adams specifically on social housing, Nick Smith on the planning side, and Stephen actually developing an overview. I was Minister of Infrastructure up till 2014. We then just dropped the title, but in discussion with Stephen and others, we felt that given the fact that we've doubled our capital allocation in the next budget, we've got a strong focus on the kind of investment you need to support a faster growing economy, that we need a minister with an overview of it.
So what kind of infrastructure? Are you looking at all types of infrastructure like roads and defence and housing? Is he across all of them?
Yeah, he'll have a pretty broad view. I mean, we've got a well-developed system in the Treasury for monitoring all of that, much better than there used to be. And so he'll be able to keep an eye on all of that. But if that makes it clear to what is one of our faster-growing industries now, that there's senior political oversight and responsibility. Okay, thanks very much.